The people of Kavana Hills often spoke of the day their entire village came within seconds of destruction. Not because of an invading empire, not because of a natural disaster, but because one man's arrogance collided with another man's fury. And the only thing that stood between them was a woman named Marah. Kavana Hills was a quiet settlement tucked between two tall mountains. Life there was simple, peaceful, and predictable. Most families farmed, others tended livestock, and everyone, whether poor or wealthy, lived by unspoken rules of humility and respect. Well, almost everyone, Duman Koro, one of the richest landowners in the settlement, was known more for his pride than his generosity. His barns were always full, his herds multiplied every season, and his pockets never felt the ache of scarcity. Yet for all his wealth, he lacked the basic wisdom that held the village together. Far beyond the hills, a group of exiled soldiers lived in the wilderness under the leadership of Captain Thane Eric. Once respected across the region, Thane had been betrayed by political rivals and driven into hiding. He and his men lived from hand to mouth, surviving off whatever nature allowed them. But even in exile, they held on to discipline. They refused to become bandits. They refused to steal from villagers. They refused to harm the helpless. Instead, they protected them. During their months in the wild, Thane's men had watched over Duman's shepherds. They chased away raiders, fought off wolves, stood guard at night when others slept. The shepherds knew they were safe because of these exiles who asked for nothing in return. So when the harvest season came, Thane sent a message to Duman, a polite request for food and water. Something small, something symbolic, a gesture of gratitude. The messengers greeted Duman respectfully, but instead of kindness, they were met with mockery. Duman laughed in their faces. "Who does this Thane think he is?" he barked. "I never asked him to protect anything. Let him starve for all I care." He waved them away like insects, boasting loudly to anyone who would listen about how he owed nothing to anyone. The messengers returned to Captain Thane with Duman's words. When Thane heard the insult, something deep within him cracked. A man can endure hunger, a man can endure betrayal, but humiliation from someone he protected, that he could not endure. Thane stood up, grabbed his sword, and commanded his men to prepare. 400 soldiers armed themselves, flames of anger burning in their eyes. Dust rose behind them as they mounted their horses. Before setting out, Thane made a vow. By dawn, there will not remain a single man in Duman Koro's household. While the soldiers marched toward Kavana Hills, Duman was at home celebrating his harvest, feasting, drinking, and bragging with friends. He had no idea that death was heading straight toward his front door, but one person did know. A young servant, terrified and pale, ran to find Marah, Duman's wife. Marah was everything her husband was not: wise, calm, respected, compassionate. The servant explained everything in a trembling voice. How Thane's men had protected the workers, how Duman insulted them, and how the captain was now riding toward the village with 400 armed soldiers. Marah felt her heart drop. She knew her husband's pride had finally gone too far. She knew this disaster was not aimed at Duman alone but at every innocent life under their roof. She didn't waste a single second. Marah ordered the workers to gather everything they could: bread, meat, fruits, wine, grain. She loaded the supplies onto horses and pack mules. Without informing Duman, she mounted her own horse and rode straight toward the valley where Thane's army was approaching. As she rode, dust swirled in the wind, and the sound of hooves echoed faintly through the mountains. Every second felt like a heartbeat closer to catastrophe. Then she saw them. 400 soldiers thundering toward the village like a storm of steel and fury. Marah didn't hesitate. She stopped her horse, got off, and walked forward until she stood alone in the middle of the path. When Captain Thane saw her, he raised his hand and the entire army came to a halt. The valley fell silent. Marah stepped forward, bowed deeply, and raised her voice not with fear, but with strength. She told Thane that her husband's arrogance did not reflect the hearts of the innocent people in their home. She confessed that Duman's pride clouded his judgment and begged the captain not to spill blood that did not deserve to be shed. She spoke to his anger, But more importantly, she spoke to his humanity. Her words cut through the fury burning inside Thane. Her humility disarmed him more than any weapon ever could. He looked at her, the bravery, the sincerity, the wisdom, and realized something. This woman was willing to stand alone between an army and her people. Thane lowered his sword. His men exhaled in relief. The march ended, and Marah, with nothing but her courage and clarity, had stopped a massacre. She returned home to find Dooman drunk and celebrating. The next morning, she told him everything. The truth. The danger. How close he had come to destroying everything they had. The shock hit him like a stone. His chest tightened. His face drained of color. And within days, the consequences of his arrogance caught up with him. When Captain Thane heard what happened, he remembered the woman who stood in the valley and quieted a storm with her voice. He sent a message to her, acknowledging her wisdom and courage. In time, the people of the region came to speak of her not as Dooman's wife, but as Marah, the wise woman of Kavana Hills. The woman who saved an entire village from a war it didn't deserve.
This year for Christmas I want